Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up this half hour. U.S. President Donald Trump sets a deadline for Hamas to respond to a peace plan formulated with Israel. Russia's UN representative Volyansky slams Western countries over sanctions on Moscow. Plus, back to the U.S. Government shutdown looms after President Trump and Democrats end meeting without a deal. You're right here on The World Today. And we begin in the United States, where President Donald Trump has praised his Gaza peace plan, describing it as an amazing thing. He's given the Hamas militant group 3 to 4 days to respond to the new 20-point peace plan. And that plan includes an end to fighting, the return of the hostages, and the creation of an international board of peace to help run Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who supported Trump's plan, says Israel will continue to oppose the recognition of a Palestinian statehood. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer praised the plan, saying all sides must now come together to bring the initiative into reality. President Trump says he's waiting on Hamas now to accept the 20-point plan. Foreign ministers from the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, Indonesia, and Pakistan have all jointly welcomed what they call Trump's leadership and his sincere efforts to end the war in Gaza. The Qatari foreign minister said Hamas is studying the White House proposal responsibly, and its prime minister says Doha is ready to continue efforts to end the war.
Sure, the success of this effort, my plan calls for the creation of a new international oversight body, the Board of Peace, we call it, the Board of Peace, sort of a beautiful name, the Board of Peace, which will be headed, not at my request, believe me, I'm very busy, but we have to make sure this works. The leaders of the Arab world and Israel and everybody involved asked me to do this, so it would be headed by a gentleman known as President Donald J. Trump of the United States. That's what I want, is some extra work to do, but it's so important that I'm willing to do it, and we'll do it right, and we're going to put leaders from other countries on, and leaders that are very distinguished leaders, and we'll have a board, and one of the people that wants to be on the board is the UK former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, good man, very good man, and some others, and they'll be named over the next few days, and it'll be quite the board. Working, everybody wants to be on it now. I don't know if that had anything to do. They named me and everybody else wanted to be on it. I guess they figure, well, he's a soft touch. He'll be easy to deal with. Working with the World Bank and others, it will be responsible for recruiting and training a new government that will be made up of Palestinians along with highly qualified experts from all around the world. Hamas and other terrorist factions will play no role in the board, but they'll play no role in the governance of Gaza at all, directly or indirectly. As you know, thousands of Hamas leaders have been killed and soldiers have been killed. And we can never forget October 7th, but thousands have paid the price for that. And now it's time to get our hostages back and get back to trying to build something that's really great and very important.
Well, the reaction to the Trump-Gaza plan has been mixed, however, in parts of Gaza as well as in Israel. The Palestinian Authority, however, welcomed the U.S. president's sincere and determined efforts to bring an end to the war. They also called for a non-militarized Palestinian state. A mother of 4 in Doha, southern Gaza, says she feels there is no choice but to support the plan, as she just wants the war to stop. Ahead of today's deal, dozens of Israelis, including families of Hamas hostages, staged a protest on Monday evening outside the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv. The protesters gathered holding American flags and photos of the hostages. Some were seen carrying signs calling for an end to the war and urging the United States to intervene to help stop it.
I'm here to support the hostage families. It's been 724 days that we're too late to bring them home, and they all need to be here. We need to end the war and bring the hostages. There's no reason not to do it. It's time. Because, you know, there's the meeting between Trump and Bibi tonight, and it's important that we'll be here. I truly believe that the person that's going to make the decision, if there's going to be a deal or not, is Trump. If somebody can force Hamas and Israel, it's only Trump. And the more pressure we put on the Americans and him, the better.
We want the hostages back. We want to end the war now. We want hostage deal. We want peace, and we want our people home. We've been protesting for the last 2 years, hoping that someone, maybe in the USA government, maybe Trump, will hear us and make Netanyahu end the war and bring the hostages home. Because if it's up to Netanyahu, he won't do it, because he needs to keep his coalition together, and his coalition, his political partners, they do not want the end of this war. They want only more dead people, both sides.
Let's bring in Israel advocate and international campaigner Ben Dorey. He joins us from London. Ben, it's great to see you. And there is only so much that we know about this deal. There is the aspect of ending the fighting, the return of the hostages, and the creation of an international board of peace to help run Gaza. The Hamas militants have 3 days now to respond, according to the U.S. president. How do you think they will react to this? Do you think this is a deal that they can accept?
Thank you. And well, obviously, it's crucial that Hamas do accept it. Israel has said from day one of this war that the war will only end with Hamas leaving power, with Gaza demilitarized, and with the hostages coming home. My suspicion is, in the absence of any intervention, Hamas will do what they've done every time a deal's been offered to them so far, which is to say no, or to drag their feet and avoid giving an answer. And I think Hamas will only actually accept this deal if they're forced to, not only by international pressure, but by some of its major supporters and funders, such as Qatar, which is why it's promising that Qatar have endorsed this deal. The final thing I would just say is that it's not enough for Hamas to just agree to this deal. The world needs to keep on the pressure on Hamas to stick to this deal in the months and years ahead.
Right, and there is a possibility Hamas might reject the deal. How are Israelis in London, however, reacting to this? Prime Minister Keir Starmer declared his support for the deal. He's among the other world leaders who have already accepted this deal. They've praised the U.S. President Donald Trump and for what he's done. They've also had to commend the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who also helped to mastermind this deal. Do you think this is something acceptable to Israelis? And what are you hearing regarding the deal itself?
Well, I mean, Israelis writ large have always wanted this conflict to end, but to end in a way that's sustainable. And the key points of this deal are actually what Israelis have been asking for the whole time, which is the hostages come back home and Hamas leaves power. And that's why there couldn't be a ceasefire before a deal like this is reached. I mean, I can certainly tell you about the views of pro-Israeli Londoners, whether they're Israeli or not, such as the British Board of the Deputy of Jews, who've welcomed the deal, as well as prominent pro-Israel campaigners like Jonathan Sacerdoti. So there's been a lot of cautious welcoming of the deal, but hope that it's actually going to be agreed to and enforced. You mentioned Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and as for him, you know, it's welcome that he commends the deal, but it has to be recognised that there are few heads of state who've done more to prevent a peaceful settlement to this war than he has. He, as well as the leaders of France and Canada, recently spearheaded a wave of Palestinian statehood recognition. And really, that was a reward for October 7th, or it's going to be received as such. And it's also going to be a motivator for terrorist activity around the world. And actually, the UK's way of doing that, the Prime Minister's way of doing that, was particularly moronic insofar as they said they would only recognise statehood if a ceasefire deal wasn't achieved by the time of the UN General Assembly, which basically has incentivised Hamas not to agree to a deal like this until now. So quite frankly, the Prime Minister's been an obstacle to peace.
It's interesting you feel this way, and you know, the countries that do support the deal are a bit divided over, you know, whether or not there should be a Palestinian state or not. But just wondering if there's so much hope, how much hope there is reposed on this deal, and what could happen if Hamas rejects it?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly world leaders really, you know, across continents and across geopolitical divides even seem to be rallying around the deal. And they probably see it as the best hope we have for an end to this war. And whether it actually ends up being a solution will depend on one, you know, are Hamas and terror groups genuinely kept out of power and out of arms? And there needs to be meaningful pressure from police and from security to make sure that happens. And two, the future governing force in Gaza has to be a genuine partner in peace and security. And we need to avoid some of the mistakes we saw, for example, in the West Bank, where even though the Palestinian Authority are probably better than Hamas, they've continued to allow Hamas to operate, and they've supported terrorism themselves, such as through kind of pay-to-slay policies. So we need real international oversight, not the fake kind that we've seen, for example, from the UN in Lebanon. If Hamas rejects this deal, I think President Trump has made it very clear what's going to happen, which is Israel is going to have the full backing of the US to continue to do what it needs to do to remove Hamas by force, to get its hostages back by force, to make sure that something like October 7th can never happen again.
Well, Ben, thanks again for expressing your views and thoughts on this.
Thanks for having me.
Russia's first deputy permanent representative to the UN, Dmitry Polyansky, has accused Western countries of relying solely on sanctions, blackmail and pressure instead of diplomacy. In an interview with Russian media, Polyansky said the United States and its allies were imposing their own rules-based order on other countries.
We are absolutely sure that these countries have absolutely no right to trigger snapback, and we do not recognize, and we didn't recognize from the outset, that the snapback was triggered. So today, for example, we will circulate a letter indicating that all the moves by the UN Secretariat to reestablish sanctions on Iran are absolutely null and void. We do not recognize these moves, and for us, the resolution 2231, since it was not extended, it will expire on the 18th of October 2025, with all the consequences that are linked to it. So, in fact, we will now work in two kind of parallel realities. One reality created by alleged snapback, allegedly triggered by the European countries and supported by the US. And the second reality is where there is no snapback, and that's reality where we live, where we function, and we will insist very much on our version and interpretation of this situation. They want to ignore things that are uncomfortable for them, and they want to highlight things that they think are.
Well, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said Ukraine will need to repay a planned reparations loan if Russia pays post-conflict reparations. Speaking alongside NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in Brussels earlier today, she said part of the loan will be linked to the purchase of European arms and stressed the frozen Russian assets will not be seized. A move comes amid debate within the bloc over the legality of using those funds. Von der Leyen announced €2 billion for drones for Ukraine and called for further sanctions on Russia, claiming existing measures are working.
Instrument changed, but the aim is always the same. And it has been now 3 years and 7 months since Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine continues to resist on the battleground, ceding virtually no territory this year. That is impressive. You know the figure that in the last 1,000 days, Russia only captured 1% of the occupied territory of Ukraine, and this despite more than a quarter of a million Russian lives lost on the battlefield. And Russia is increasingly economically under pressure. If you look at the interest rates, they are at 17%. Inflation is well above 10%. And I believe firmly that we are at a moment where decisive action on our side can lead to a turning point in this conflict. We have advanced on several work strands. The first is we are increasing the economic pressure on Russia. The sanctions are working. If you look at Russia's GDP last year in 2024, it was 4.3%. Now it's projected to go down to 0.9% in 2025. So we need to increase the pressure. And to this end, we have proposed a new sanctions package with robust measures on energy, financial services and trade. Most important, one key element is the prohibition of LNG imports from Russia to the European Union.
Meanwhile, the United States is under a time crunch, to have new funding approved by Congress, or the country's government will be closed until the Democrats and Republicans in the U.S. Congress reach a funding agreement. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird has more.
At risk of a government shutdown if new funding is not approved by U.S. Congress before October 1st, which will put a halt to most government services and may put millions of American jobs on furlough or mass layoffs.
I think for the first time, the president heard our objections and heard why we needed a bipartisan bill. Their bill has not one iota of Democratic input. That is never how we've done this before. When I was leader, we negotiated 4 times with Republicans, and we never had a shutdown. And so it's up to the Republicans whether they want to shut down or not. We've made to the president some proposals. Our Republican leaders will have to talk to them about them, but ultimately he's the decision maker. And if he will accept some of the things we asked, which we think the American people are for, on health care and on rescissions, he can avoid a shutdown.
Federal budget negotiations are at an impasse. Republicans control both the House and the Senate, but lack the supermajority to bypass Senate rules, as they must secure bipartisan support. Democrats are pushing to roll back Medicaid cuts and restore the Affordable Care Act subsidies as part of a funding deal.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. We just had a very frank conversation with the Senate and House Democratic leadership. Look, the principle at stake here is very simple. We have disagreements about tax policy, but you don't shut that government down. We have disagreements about health care policy, but you don't shut the government down. You don't use your policy disagreements as leverage to not pay our troops, to not have essential services of government actually function. You don't say the fact that you disagree about a particular tax provision is an excuse for shutting down the people's government and all the essential services that come along with it. If you look at what Chuck Schumer has said in the past consistently, it's whatever our disagreements are, let's negotiate with them, let's talk about them, let's figure out a bipartisan solution.
The U.S. experienced a government shutdown in 2018 during President Trump's first administration due to a lack of support for a bipartisan funding deal.
In previous shutdowns, we have seen disruptions to farm loans, rural development programs, some of those veteran assistance training and support programs, even rental assistance for low-income Americans has been impacted. We've seen the closure of national parks, which has impacted tourism across the country, and of course that has a large indirect effect on local economies.
In less than 24 hours, the U.S. government may be shut down. Without Congress approving the budget, the U.S. economy could reduce GDP by about $11 billion overall. And of that, $3 billion may not be recoverable. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channel Television News.
The Cameroonian government has introduced online registration for consular cards for citizens of the country around the world. The consular card is an identity card presented at any Cameroonian mission, indicating that the citizen or the carrier, is a bona fide citizen of the country and should therefore be granted necessary assistance. The card also enables law authorities to identify the carrier as a citizen of Cameroon. The Minister Plenipotentiary Inspector General of Services at the Ministry of External Affairs in Cameroon, Mrs. Sylvie Ilong, intimated Cameroonians resident in Lagos about the new process, which will now cost 20,000 francs, payable in the Naira equivalent.
As you well know, Cameroon diplomatic missions and consular posts all over the world are there to protect and assist Cameroonian citizens living abroad. So you seated here and all our friends of that, you are our priority. Bilateral cooperation with the Nigerian government is second. The Cameroonian citizen is number one. We want to start changing that mentality where Cameroonians don't feel welcome in their diplomatic mission, in their consular post. No, that this is your house. You are our priority. You are not a Lagos. So consequently, during this era of digitalization, our government decided to improve consular services from what we used to have. What we used to have was not digitalized, because the expectations now with modern technology is very high. That's why since last year, we started with the visa to make it more secure, to modernize the visa, and now we're moving to another step, which is the consular card, because living in Nigeria, the consular card is very important to function. So that's why we decided to computerize it. I'll come to the importance of the card. So since April, the 1st of April 2022, the government of Cameroon has been committed to transform and mobilize our consular services in general. And through these consular reforms, the Cameroonian government seeks to reduce deadlines.
And that's the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.